An awesome retirement is everyone's dream, but planning for that awesome retirement, maybe not so much, at least for some. It's hard to predict the future, and there's so much choice available for you in terms of retirement plans. And my guest today, a returning guest, helps her clients work through their choices, and she's going to help us hopefully get started. There's a lot going on out there, so we have faith. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. That's usually what they want, but everything is better. The important things are better when the provider owns the practice. They get to make the clinical decisions they think are best. They get to schedule patients how they want to. And nobody else is whispering in the provider's ear what they want, clinically, scheduling, operationally, anything. It's just the provider. It's much simpler and better when it's privately owned. So let's do our part to keep it that way. My returning guest today is Alexis Galati. Alexis is the founder and lead tax strategist at Cerebral Tax Advisors and Cerebral Wealth Academy, and she's the author of the book, Advanced Tax Planning for Medical Professionals. She's over 20 years of experience in high-level strategic tax planning and multi-state tax preparation, and she is trained at the highest level, holding 2 master's degrees. Alexis grew up in a family of physicians and is married to a private practice physician. That's why she understands how hard medical professionals work to get where they are and why she provides simple and accessible tax solutions tailored to busy physicians. I want to note we are recording here on October 15th. Today is the third quarter tax submission deadline day, and yet Alexis, you found some time to get us to get here. We really appreciate it. Thank you for coming back onto PracticeCare.
Thank you, Carl. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you having me back.
Yes, it's wonderful. And it's a topic I love. I love anything about planning, and I love anything with nuance and detail. That's just how my brain operates. So I'm geeked out about this one. I'm going to start where I start with every guest, though you are returning. We know you have listeners, we know your downloads, but we can't guarantee that everyone who listened last time is the same people. So fill in the gaps. I mean, to help us get to know you a bit better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So as you said, my name is Alexis Galati. I am located in Knoxville, Tennessee, but I have lived all over the US. Well, my husband, as you mentioned, he's a physician, and we moved, whether it's, for me doing graduate school or him doing medical school and then residency. But when he was in residency, I, was working for local regional CPA firms for 12, 13 years. And I went out on my own in 2014 because I really saw the writing on the wall. Like he was going to be going from, his little residency salary to being, he's joined a private practice group, but, so the real big change. And so in salary. And so I was like, oh, geez, why are the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates of the world in this 0% tax bracket, or really 15%, like really, really low. And so that's what really sparked my interest in going out, learning the tax strategies and applying all the knowledge that I had from compliance, as well as my master's degrees. I have my MBA and my master's in tax. And, how can I save tax not only for my own situation, but for other physicians as well. And that, when I built Cerebral, it really was around specializing with medical professionals. And it just kind of organically happened that way. Like I said, my husband's a neurosurgeon, my dad's a neurologist. And so that's why we have Cerebral Tax Advisors. I don't know if I ever shared that little tidbit with you.
I knew there was a tie. There had to be a tie. It wasn't random.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it was like we at Cerebral think harder about your taxes or something like that.
We do.
But, well, there you go.
Just all work together.
It's multidimensional.
Perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And so, not only do, so we work primarily with physicians that are private practice owners, or they do locum tenens work, or they have some sort of 1099, some sort of side gig, even if the majority of their income is W-2. Mm-hmm. It's all about opening up the tax code and trying to just take advantage of the same legal strategies that others, millionaires and billionaires of the world use.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. And I'm excited to talk about retirement, because that's one of my favorite tax strategies, not only for shifting income away from the IRS and putting it into your retirement, letting that
Mm-hmm.
grow tax-free, but then you also get a tax deduction out of it as well, especially if it's pre-tax. So.
Yes, yes. And the world needs people who are passionate about this topic too. So we have found one. All right. First question, and this is in one way an unanswerable question, but I think it's going to open the door for us. And here's the question. How much can you contribute to a retirement plan?
Yeah.
And the reason I think it's
Well,
unanswerable because it depends on the plan, right? So
exactly. Yes. It depends on so many different variables. One is the type of retirement plan. Second is how much you're making. And also contribution limits, so, and then also your cash flow.
Yeah.
So, if you are contributing to like a simple IRA, like I say you have a business and you simple IRA, I believe that's about like $13,000 or $14,000 max you can do for this year.
Okay.
But if you're a SEP IRA or 401k, then you're looking at $69,000 a year for 2024. If you're doing a cash balance plan, well, you could be putting way up into six figures. So it really just depends on, the type of plan, their limitations, and that are established by the IRS. And then, how much you're essentially making. And also too, whether or not you have employees as well.
So how much you're making, mean if you make only a certain amount, you don't you're not eligible for certain plans, or it's just not practically. If you only make a certain amount, you wouldn't put too much. Is that what you mean, or both?
The calculation. So let's say you're a sole proprietorship, and the way that retirement is calculated is based on your profit. So if you have $100,000 of profit, then the way that it's calculated for like a 401k, for example, you can do an employee contribution or deferral, for this year, it's $23,000. And then the employer contribution is your $100,000 profit minus half of self-employment tax multiplied by 20%.
Okay.
And so then that comes out to be your employer contribution. So the two together is your maximum pre-tax contribution. But if you're, let's say, an S corporation, then the retirement is calculated based off of your W-2. So let's say you have $100,000 W-2, then you still have, with a 401k, your $23,000 employee deferral. And then you have 25% of your employer contribution. So you can put in $25,000 for the employer contribution.
Right.
And so, if you do the 23 plus the 25, that's a max contribution of $48,000 that you can put away. Now, if your salary is, let's say 100 or 200,000, then you can put up to six, you can put to 69,000, and then you're maxed out. That's the max you can do, even though if you do 200,000 times 25%, that's good. Plus your 23, that's going to be more than 69,000. But the IRS defines that contribution amount.
That's the ceiling. And is that employee that's combined 69, or that's just a combined? Okay.
Combined, yeah.
Okay. So you have a lot of choices. I'm not going to ask you, although you piqued my interest on why the IRS has different ceilings for these depending on but whatever, for another episode. So you've got the max amounts you can contribute. The other parts that typically go into decisions on a generic basis is how much do each of these options cost? How complicated are they? I mean, what other reasons should people consider when they're thinking about, I want to choose this plan option because?
Yes, costs are obviously a factor into it. There's setting up like a simple IRA or a SEP IRA or even a 401k, those are a lot less expensive than, let's say, a defined benefit plan or a cash balance plan.
Okay.
Because they don't take as much work, essentially. Like the cash balance plan, you're usually looking at anywhere from probably $1,000 to $3,000 in setup costs, depending on the provider.
Okay.
And that's for a 401k and a cash balance plan, I should mention.
Okay.
And then, because normally those get kind of paired together, and we can talk about that a little bit, and then the annual maintenance on a cash balance plan, again, tends to be somewhere between like $2,000 to $5,000, again, depending upon the third-party administrator that you're using to administer the plan for you.
Okay.
But you're also able to put so much more weight into a cash balance plan that the and all those costs are tax deductible. So normally there is a good, amazing cost benefit
Right.
between having it. And so, and, where with like a 401k plan, it's usually about, $500 or so to set up. And then the administration of it is usually about the same per year, give or
Okay.
take, again,
Okay.
depending upon the provider. As SEP IRA, you can just set that up yourself. You can just go to Fidelity or Charles Schwab and just open it up. And as long as you don't have employees, you really don't need a plan agreement in place. It's
Okay.
usually best to always have those sort of things.
Sure.
Now, the other factor besides cost is obviously your cash flow. How much do you want to be spending on it? And how much do you want to be putting away as well? With SEP IRA, you can only do employer contributions. There's no employee deferrals like there is for 401k. And so, and then obviously with the cash balance plan, you can put a lot more away. And so, if you want to fund it, with bigger dollar amounts, then you just need to understand that there's a cost involved with it.
Sure.
And really especially with like a cash balance plan, you can't do those calculations yourself. You need to have an actuary do them.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So where
they're
if
easy
you're
to
solo,
find.
Yeah. And so with solo, 401k plans, you can do those calculations easily yourself. And another factor is if you have employees, then, you're really going to want to have somebody else doing those calculations for you, so your accountant might be able to do it, especially for SEP IRAs. But really for, simple IRAs, 401ks, cash balance plans, you're going to want to work with a third-party administrator, not only to help with calculations, but also to establish what is an eligible employee and helping to keep track of those things. You also have to do tax returns for your retirement plans as well. It's Form 5500. You don't owe tax on them. It's just, the IRS is nosy and wants to know how much you have in your plans each year. So they're able to help with all of those administrative duties, and as well as help kind of take a little bit of liability off of you if you have employees.
Yeah.
In case, yeah.
I was going to say it's you sort of reminded me, we say taxes, but it's tax law. So you got to follow the law. Don't go violating the law, and you need to do all these things. So yeah, I want to ask a question we didn't talk about, but it's really, can you, without going, I don't want to like bog us down, but can you just like kind of list out like what some of the more popular retirement plan choice options are? Maybe we should have done this at the beginning. Just like there's simple, there's cash, there's Roth, there's, just maybe some of the more common ones you see with your client, just so we can have a sense of, and maybe what I don't know the best way to like, kind of structure it, but whatever you think, like if you were talking to a client, you said, so what are my choices? Maybe you could answer it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's start with the easy ones. And these are individual retirement accounts. So these are ones that you can set up as an individual that don't involve your employer. And so those are traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, or individual retirement accounts. And so the limits for those generally change every year. So, this year it's $7,000, and you are able to put that money into, let's say, a traditional IRA. If you don't reach certain income limits, that money that you put into your pre-tax IRA is deductible on your tax return.
Right.
But if you earn too much, then, and the amount changes every year, and I believe it's about 150,000, give or take, then you're not able to do a tax deductible pre-tax IRA contribution.
Right.
But then if you want to, you can always do a Roth contribution as well. So, I mean, that's actually, like, let's say you're a resident, then, you're not making as much, then it might be better for you to actually do a Roth contribution where you're putting in post-tax dollars. So you've already paid tax on that money, and you're going in, letting those dollars grow tax-free, and then they'll come out tax-free at retirement time.
Big deal.
Big difference. Yeah. So you're taking advantage of your lower tax rate while you're a resident. I mean, really, it's a no-brainer. Just go that route. Where with a pre-tax IRA, yes, you might be getting a deduction in the beginning, but it's growing tax-free. And then you have to take when you take the money out at retirement time, you have to pay tax on it at that
Yeah.
tax rate at that time. So
Yeah.
in theory, you'll be earning more as a resident, or not within as a when you're retired than you are as a resident, and so it makes more sense to do that. So
Yeah.
so that's your pre-tax IRA and then your Roth IRA. And so, let's say with the problem with the Roth IRA as well is that they do have income limits for the direct Roth IRA contribution. And so I think for that, for a married couple, I want to say it's a little over 200,000 or so, but
Sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah. And if you make more than that, then you can't make a direct Roth contribution and you can't make a deductible IRA contribution. So what are your options? That's where the backdoor Roth comes in. And what happens there is you put your $7,000 as a non-deductible IRA contribution. And then you roll over that money into your Roth IRA. And since you've already paid tax on that contribution to your traditional IRA, you will be able to do that rollover tax-free into your Roth IRA. And that's assuming that you don't butt up into pro rata rules. And I'm happy to go into that into more detail if you'd like. That's
Just really watch out for the pro rata rules, listeners. Yeah.
Watch out for the pro rata rules. But then that's a really great way for you as an individual to continue to fund your traditional IRA, even if you have your Roth IRA, even if you have a retirement plan through your W-2 employment, or you have a work retirement plan through your private practice or your locum work, et cetera.
Okay.
So any follow-up questions on that before I get into?
No, those are the individual. Yeah, let's go to the employer side.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so from there, there's a plethora of options. We started to already mention there's, the simple IRA, there is the SEP IRA, the 401k, and then, the defined benefit plan or cash balance plan. And I mean, there's a multitude of different other ones out there, but those are definitely the most common.
Okay.
Simple IRAs, they have a very low limit that, like I said, the max you can really put in there is about $13,000 or $14,000 a year. But they're very simple to set up. They're very cost effective. And so like if you have employees, then I believe the amount they usually put in is about 3% for your employees. But again, very simple to administer, very easy to put in. That's all pre-tax.
Okay. And
then you have your SEP IRA, which is just employer contributions. So if you have employees, they can't put their own money into the plan.
Okay.
It's only you as the employer that can put money in.
Okay.
And that's generally about 25% of your earnings can go into that. And it can be different amounts. It can be lower amounts. So like if you have employees, you might just have to look and see what works best for you. But in general, if you're putting 25 in for you have to put in 25 for your employees.
Okay. For like one pool of 25 for all your employees, or is it per employee, or is it
per employee? So you look at how much they're making.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next one is the 401k. And this is probably the most popular. And there's an employee deferral. So that's where you as the employee or your staff members can put part of their W-2 wages into retirement. So you as the individual, the employee are funding your retirement.
Right.
And then there's an employer portion as well. Usually when you have employees, there's a safe harbor provision as well as a profit sharing provision. And you don't necessarily have to have the profit sharing provision, but most docs like to have it so that they can be putting more away for themselves. And so the safe harbor provision and then the profit sharing provision are employer contributions. Okay. And what is the safe harbor? What is that? I've never heard of that before. Yeah. So you might have maybe seen this if you ever were employed by somebody else before, but there's usually a set amount. So most common ones are you pay 3% to your employees, whether they contribute to they do that employee deferral or not. Oh, yes. And then there's also another one we can do 4%, but your employee has to contribute to their employee deferral for
Got it.
them to get any of the 4%. So that's kind of like that
The
matching
match.
that you
Yes.
might
Yes,
hear
yes,
about.
yes. Now I
So
understand.
those,
Okay.
yeah, those percentages can be different, but those are probably the most common that I've seen.
Okay.
So you just kind of have to decide, okay, do I just want to know my costs and do the 3%, and no matter whether the employee contributes or not, or maybe, like, hey, I have a front office staff and they're not likely to contribute, so I'll be able to save money by doing the 4% because maybe
Mhm.
one or two front staff are going to contribute. So
Right. Because they have to contribute for you to contribute
yes,
to match
exactly.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then the profit sharing part, if you contribute to your profit sharing, then it's a certain percentage that you have to contribute to them.
Okay.
Um, and 401ks are a little bit more expensive, but really not that bad in the scheme of things. And they, take a little bit more calculation as well. But I like them because they allow you to put more away if you're not maxing out to the 69, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So because there's an employee and an employer portion where the SEP IRA only has the employee contributions.
Okay.
The other main reason why I don't recommend SEPs is because they preclude you from doing the tax-free backdoor Roth.
Oh.
And that gets into those pro rata rules we mentioned earlier.
Mm.
And so if you have a SEP IRA that has a balance in it, then basically with pro rata rules, the IRS can't distinguish pre-tax and post-tax dollars within all of your IRAs. So
If it's all
within your
mixed together. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So even though you have an individual IRA and then you have your SEP IRA, they kind of see it as all one lump sum.
Okay.
And so if they can't distinguish it, then they'll say, hey, if you have like $10,000 of pre-tax and then another $10,000 of post-tax in there,
Mhm.
they'll say that, well, if you roll over your that $7,000 from pre-tax to post-tax, they're going to say 50% of that $7,000 that you've contributed is now going to be taxed again.
Got
because
it.
they don't know if you're really putting post-tax dollars in there or pre-tax.
So they can't
dollars
tell.
in
So
there.
it's like a catch-all. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So that's like a basic calculation of it, but that's essentially the pro rata rule. So you need to have zero balance in your pre-tax IRA accounts, and that includes the SEP IRA,
Mhm.
for you to do a tax-free backdoor Roth.
Okay.
So I just say, cut through the red tape, just go and do a 401k. And even if you already have a SEP IRA set up, you're like, oh man, I already have this set up. Like, what do I do? You can just move those funds from your SEP IRA to your 401k, just transfer it over, zero out the balance of your SEP IRA. And that'll be a tax-free rollover because it's just going pre-tax to pre-tax. And then that way you have to do that by the end of the year before December 31st. And that will allow you to avoid those pro rata rules.
Got it. Okay. And then the cash balance, is that like a pension plan? Like what used to be known as, is that what is that?
Yeah, sometimes they're considered pension plans, but essentially those are defined contribution plan. Defined benefit plans. My apologies. So kind of the difference is with the 401k, for example, as a defined contribution plan, or even the SEP IRA, the IRS is defining how much you're allowed to put in each year. They're saying here's X amount, and that's usually determined by Congress, and they're in quote unquote infinite wisdom.
Right.
The defined benefit plan, the IRS is defining the benefit that you'll receive by the time that you retire. So when you're setting this up, you define a retirement age. So let's just say it's age 62.
Okay.
So the IRS says, hey, by the time that you reach age 62, you can put away X amount in there. And that amount changes every year. I think right now it's about 3.5 million. So if you're, let's say, 30 years old, you have 32 years to get up to that 3.5 million. And what happens is with the cash balance plan, the actuary is kind of doing a back calculation based on your age, how much you make, whether or not you have employees, and the balance of the account at the end of the year.
Okay.
And so first year, it's a little bit easier because you haven't established anything, you don't have any amount in there. So what they do is they say, assuming a consistent rate of growth, and usually that growth you kind of keep between 3 and 6%.
Okay.
Let's just say it's 5%. Assuming a 5% growth over, the next 32 years, then as of today, you can put in this much to, assuming that you'd be putting the similar amount in each year.
Right.
So they'll do that calculation. And obviously let's say you start this plan at 45, then you have a much shorter period of time to get to that defined contribution amount, or defined benefit amount. So you're going to be able to put away easily into the 6 figures, to catch up. So obviously the younger you are, the less you can put in each year because you have more time to let that grow.
Right.
But yeah. And then if you have employees, how much they make, their age come into factor. So if you have other highly compensated employees, which, that again changes each year, but for this year, it's about 150,000. So if, you have employees that are, highly compensated and maybe they're older than you, that's going to skew the numbers a bit more than you have somebody that's younger or maybe makes less.
And so you make one contribution every year, so to speak. That's sort of the weighted average of everybody who's in it, kind of, sort of. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. So it's the cash balance plans, unlike the 401ks, are like, it's a pooled account. So all the funds are together. You don't have individual accounts, but the actuaries and your third-party administrator that administers the account will take, like, if let's say there's $500,000 in there, they'll say like, hey, this is how much is your portion of that pooled amount. And don't ask me how those are all calculated.
No, I'm not going to ask you.
Yes.
The amount of math that's involved in actuary. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. You have to go to school for all that. I'm sure that they have softwares and programs, but those are all the different factors that come into it. And in general, with cash balance plans, you want to keep them open for a minimum of 5 years and fund them for a minimum of 3 years. And that's just because the IRS doesn't want somebody having like a one-time big income event, dumping a bunch of money into it, overfunding it essentially, and then closing it down. I mean, that looks more like a tax avoidance scheme than a legitimate retirement plan.
Okay.
And so, these are really great for physicians or, business owners in general that just want to put more money away into retirement, get a nice tax deduction, and, be able to, essentially, like, the way I like to say it is, instead of giving the money to the IRS, you're putting that money into your retirement, and then you're able to get a tax deduction off of it as well.
And what happens in the defined benefit if the actuary says, you're going to come up short? Like, do they have to catch up, or does that happen?
Yes, that can happen. So if you remember, we discussed, like, you have to keep the growth usually between 3 and 6%. Let's say it doesn't grow at all that year.
So 2022 happens and everybody went way down. I mean, not everybody, but so now you didn't come close to 5. So then the next year you're kind of behind, right?
Exactly. So you'll have to put more in,
right.
Like, you might have to contribute more into the plan to catch it up. But then let's say it's the opposite. So let's say it grows 12%. Then you're not going to be able to put as much in the next year because it's essentially overfunded. So making sure you have a portfolio that accounts for that 3 to 6% growth is critical within this type of plan.
Got it.
Now, if you, like, right now, interest rates are kind of great, so you can easily just kind of put it into like a Fidelity government money market fund. I mean, that's about 4 to 5%. Yeah. So it's super easy. But if it was a few years ago, then where things were just kind of going out over the roof, then you could get yourself in trouble. And so there is a lot more nuance and maintenance that goes on with this type of plan, but I mean, if you're able to put away six figures, then, it's saving you so much more money, and the cost benefit is there essentially.
Kind of takes care of itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're like me too, where I don't like the idea of my funds only growing 3 to 6% each year, there is a strategy where you can keep it open for that 5-year period that usually like to see. Then you can close down the cash balance plan, move it into your 401k,
Oh my God.
where you can be more aggressive.
Yeah.
And then about a year later, open up another, you can reopen the cash balance plan and then start funding at those bigger dollar amounts.
Wow.
So every 5 years, I mean, there's a little bit more administrative cost with that to close it down, to restart it. I mean, most places won't charge you the same amount like as it was when you first started, but you
Whatever, the ROI has got to be
benefit.
pretty obvious. I mean, even if it's a few bucks more, oh my God.
Yes, exactly. And it's important to point out as well with the cash balance plan, that's all pre-tax. There's no Roth option.
Got it.
Where with like the 401k, you can have a Roth option for the employee part of it.
Right.
So that's something to consider too. But you can also get into with when you combine a 401k and a cash balance plan, your profit sharing is normally limited to 6% as opposed to that 25%. Let's say if you're an S Corp. And that's just the mechanics of having the two together.
Okay.
And so like if you earn $100,000, that's your eligible compensation, then your profit sharing may only be $6,000. So if you want to max out the 69, you can do, so like if you have 100,000, the max you can do is 69,000 this year. Then you're putting 23,000 pre-tax into your employee deferral. And then you're getting another 6,000 for your employer contribution. You can have provisions within your 401k to do a mega backdoor Roth.
I was going to ask you about this next, the mega back. Let's just tease people here.
Yeah.
Let's go into mega back, because there's the backdoor, then the mega, as if the backdoor weren't enough. So yeah.
You can tell I love talking about this stuff.
It is something. For those of you who are just listening, she's gone to the calculator twice. So here we go. All right, mega backdoor.
Yeah. So with the mega backdoor Roth, which can only be done within your 401k plan.
Okay.
And so, and what happens with this is you're able to put the balance that you did not, of the 69,000 that you did not put into your pre-tax part of the account into post-tax. So again, that $69,000 minus the 23 for the employee deferral, minus the 6,000 for the profit sharing employer contribution. That's $40,000 that you can put in post-tax into your retirement. So you don't get a deduction for that 40,000, but it's going to grow tax-free and then come out tax-free.
Yeah.
Retirement. Or if you even want to, that's one great thing about Roths. Like, they're not subject to required minimum distribution rules, RMD rules, which occur somewhere between 73 and 75, depending upon when you were born. And so you can just leave those alone. You can give, if you don't need them, and you can give it to your kids, and they don't have to pay tax on it. So it's like,
I did this math one day because I was trying to figure out, would I contribute to we're going to butcher some of this, to a traditional or a Roth, or would I do a conversion? So I've got a traditional IRA from a former company, and I've opened up a Roth. Would I take new money and put it in the traditional, or would I put it in the Roth, pay tax now and put it in the Roth? And the pay tax now and put it in the Roth just crushed, because you could say, all right, 20 years later, they're both going to grow at the same rate. You may have to make an assumption. And the $7,000 grows to whatever. It later down the road, you're paying tax on whatever it grew into. And because it's a larger number, you're going to pay more tax. And so if you take the tax rate on the 7,000 today and make that whatever it is, make it 5,000, I don't know, and that grows, but you don't pay any tax, what you pay tax later reduces more than if you just let it go, if you just put it in the Roth today. And so to me, it was like a no-brainer. And in fact, the only way it worked is if there was zero tax. So it was just like, it was just, to me, it was a no-brainer. It was an absolute
Yeah.
no-brainer.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with, how much you're making right now
Mhm.
and what you predict, like when you predict that you're going to retire,
Mhm.
and then what your tax rates are going to be then. Like I don't I'm unlike a lot of financial advisors out there. Like I don't consider myself a financial advisor. I'm a tax strategist, but I don't subscribe to the tax rates are going to go up.
I always, I'm like, why? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
If,
yeah.
if you look back, so we had a major tax like law changes in the mid 80s, sorry, mid
Mhm.
80s. And ever since then, if you go and look at tax rates, they've stayed about the same. I mean, they might have gone up a touch, but inflation has gone up, and
Mhm.
and like changes, et cetera. But it's really been within the same like 5%, give or take.
Mhm.
And I don't ever see us going back to like the 60s and 70s where there was sometimes like up to 90% tax.
Mhm.
Like there's no way anybody would be voted into Congress if
Yeah.
they did
Yeah.
that. So I'm a big fan of the strategy, like right now, like even with my husband and I, which by the way is one reason why a lot of my clients work with me, is because we're in a very similar tax situation
Mhm.
as
Like you get it.
a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're using the same strategies. And so right now, like we're kind of in a really high tax bracket. And so it makes more sense for us to do a lot pre-tax and get the tax savings so that we can invest those tax savings.
Mhm.
And then if we were to, let's say, retire at age 60, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
we're of the age group that our RMDs, at least at the moment, would start at age 75.
Mhm.
So then if let's say we both retire at age 60, then in theory, our tax rates will go down quite a bit because we're not earning
Yeah.
as much.
Mhm.
And we can then do controlled Roth conversions over a 15-year
You've got
period.
15 years to go make it more tax efficient. Exactly right.
Yeah.
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 And at the same time, taking money out of a pre-tax account, whatever it is income. So people say, well, I'm going to stop working in retirement. That's true. However, whatever nut you've built over the years, any of it that hasn't been taxed yet, and it's taxed at ordinary income rates, right? That's the part
Mm-hmm.
that's just, I find frustrating. I get it because it was never taxed at ordinary. But so yeah, so that's your income. That's your as if you were still working, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what the tax law says. So, but you're right, you've got 13 to 15 years or whatever to say, all right, how do we take this thing and make it more tax efficient over that time? It's totally true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a whole bunch of different strategies. I mean, that could be a whole another
Yeah. Huh.
podcast about
Yes.
going and looking at retirement time and etc. But that's why I'm a big advocate in always making sure you're funding your retirement. I have a lot of clients that will come to me and be like, hey, like I want to make sure that my kids have, tuition paid for, they have their college funds, because I don't want them being in the same situation I was, having to take out student loans.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to harm your retirement account. Like put retirement in first, and because you
Yeah.
can't take loans out for retirement, and you don't know if your
Correct.
kids are going to get scholarships or things like that,
Yeah.
or if they might go to state school or maybe go to vocational, like
Who knows?
type of school, trade
Yeah.
school. So I'm not saying not to save for your kids
Correct.
education, but there's other ways to do it,
Mm-hmm.
that they're
Not
more
at the
tax efficient
expense
with.
of, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and not shooting yourself in the foot later years.
Got it. Got it. My goodness, we covered a lot of ground. Holy cow, more than I anticipate. This has been great. It's really been great. And there's a couple of wrap-up questions I ask every guest, which listeners will know by now. I think I'm going to skip the first one. Is anything I think you think I should have asked you but didn't, but I think I want to skip that one because I
There's
think
probably a lot, but
oh my God, yes, there's 6,000 things. So yeah. But the other question is, so we've caught a listener's attention and like, she's right. I got to get better about this or get off this or whatever. Any listener to this episode will say to themselves what I'm saying, which is, where do you start? So where do you start? Like, what's a simple place somebody could start just to get moving, just as soon as they're done listening.
Yeah. Well, first is, especially if you're employed W-2, okay, go look at your retirement plans that your employer has. Check out, how much the expenses and, what plans you have. If they do any matching, like you should always be taking advantage of any match. Even if you have your own 1099 income, and you could do your own plan, like if there's a match, take advantage of it.
Free money.
I'll get off my soapbox. Exactly. And then, if you have, your own 1099 income, your own practice, doing locums, etc., just start doing basic research out there. I mean, even chat GPT it, like about the different plans, and start investigating the costs, in your area, if you're going to use someone local versus like a national provider. And, even, in my book, Advanced Tax Planning for Medical Professionals, I describe a lot of these different retirement plans. But hopefully this podcast has going to given you a great insight into at least the basics.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just need to find out on your specific situation. You can talk with your tax advisor or even your financial advisor about the different types of plans, see what they recommend, and then kind of go out there and on the web and see what would, it's just about educating yourself. And then once you've kind of decided which plan you want, then looking at cost options, and then that's set up.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as, if you haven't done anything, go open up a Roth IRA, assuming you qualify like tomorrow. Yeah. What's the worst that happens? What's the worst that happens? And if there's any sort of tax-free down the road, like the after-tax version today, so that you don't pay tax upon withdrawal down the road, go open one up. What's the worst that happens? Money gets trapped, air quotes, in a tax-free environment. It's not really much of a trap. But then, and the other thing I think of sometimes, I do this, is, oh, that one's got an upper limit of 69,000. I don't have 69,000. Well, you don't need to have the full 69. Put whatever you can. Just get some experience in it. Honestly, what's the worst that could happen? And then eventually you'll get to a plan and a set of choices that work for you. But the worst thing you can do is nothing, because this is where time is on your side is ever more true than in this, because it's when compounding can happen. And the more, that's where time really matters. So just do something, and get Alexis's book, because she says she lays it all out. And if you can get all this in one place, you should. So Alexis, thank you. Thank you for coming back onto PracticeCare and helping us try to make sense of a topic I knew had a lot of facets. I did not appreciate how many facets. So thank you for doing it. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carl. I appreciate being here.
Yeah. And you supplied some contact information, which we're going to put in the show notes for the episode. There's lots of ways to get a hold of you. And now there's another way in the show notes. So thanks for supplying those. A couple of points before we wrap up for the day. If you are someone like Alexis or us and you serve private practice owners, you've got some experience in your domain that you think private practice owners will benefit from, we want you to come on PracticeCare. Or if you're a private practice owner yourself and you've figured out some stuff on the business side that you think your peers will benefit from, also come on PracticeCare. In the show notes for Alexis's episode and every episode, there's a link. It's really easy. Tell us what's on your mind. Go there. We'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to PracticeCare. It's one word, PracticeCare. We're everywhere. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll find us. We're on just about every major player, and on YouTube if you like watching this. Either way, anyway, just subscribe so you can stay up to date. Thanks very much, and until next time.